Oh, well, when the floods come now, you can't, and the wall is here to protect us, you can't envisage what it was like when the floods were in the whole, a lot of the village was flooded, because down Thorpe Lane, from the corner end was clear of water. It started at Stores from Old Road, and it went all the way along, and it went to Church End, the entrance to Church End, in front of Thorpe, well, it was Thorpe House, Thorpe Lane Farm. And that's why the railings were first put there, and the footpath lifted so that when it flooded, people could get into the village. And then all the way along to, there was a rise where the Grange back entrance is, and then it dropped towards the police station, and the police station corner was too deep in water. I do remember one flood where somebody had a tractor and was taking everybody across through the water on the tractor, and then it rose again, the level rose by Keysbury Cottage, and then dipped Gill Green towards the school, but you could get to the school by the grass in front of it, but the road was all flooded because there was a dyke at the other side then, down Broad Lane. But really, and the floods, they're all King Street and got it really bad. North Terrace, it even flooded by the Old Boys School. Floods came up there. I think Back Lane as well, Chestnut Road that is now. We used to call it all Back Lane. And it flooded in front of the vicarage so much, just on the ground. And then it must have risen a little bit further on. And of course those bungalows, and before they were built, that was all floodland, opposite the cemetery. And then in the last big flood before the wall was put up, they were flooded, weren't they? There's a lot of buildings that's been built that should never be, wouldn't flood if they hadn't ever been built there, because the bungalows down Church End in the 70s and the 80 flood, 82, they flooded. So it's really protected a lot of property, as that wall. And in Cawood, we were completely cut off because there wasn't the facilities that there are now for helping people. And they did have the army ducks came into the village after about a few days, and we were getting everywhere, including Selby and us, and everywhere we're getting a bit low on provisions, and they had they brought in sort of food aid. And I do remember that some of it was American, because it was the first time we'd ever seen spam as it was. We'd never had that here. And they had some pressed meat similar that was called Prem and more, and all this, and tins of fruit and things that, of course, things were still rationed, and all kinds of lovely things. And there was a lady lived at the Grange called Mrs. Clough, and she was in charge of distributing all these food provisions. And so that was something that was unusual. And of course we couldn't get into the village. We had to go through the Grange yard in Wellingtons, and then we could get into the village. And there were very few tractors, and of course no cars in those days, very few. Doctor had a car, farmers had a car, 2 or 3, and so you were really cut off if it hadn't been for people bringing things in and out. But I do believe the school kept open, because in those days the headmaster lived at the side of the house and teachers lived in the village. And so the school kept going. Well, nowadays all the schools close in these flooded areas. The same when there was terrific snowfalls. I don't remember not being able to get to school because of the snow. But yes, and then funny things happened, because I remember going onto the side of the bridge and looking across. There wasn't all the willow trees and things in those days. So we went onto the river front, low down as it was then. There wasn't the wall. And looking, you could see across down Ferry Lane, and there was a hen house floating down there, and there were hens. It eventually hit one of the telegraph poles and broke so much, and these hens were all on the wires. And then from my auntie's house in North Terrace was very deep. It was about 4 or 5 feet in their house, and they still stayed in the house. People took them provisions by boat, and they stayed in the house but stayed upstairs. And my uncle, when he did manage to get out, he told me, and I went to have a look. He said that there was a little patch at the other side of the river going towards Stillingfleet. The banks can't have been completely level at that time, and there was a little patch about a yard, and there was a hare, and it sat there for well, about 10 days, something like that. And I don't know what eventually happened to it, but this hare was sitting there, and also 1 or 2 chickens. And they were stranded, and this chicken hut eventually sort of smashed up and washed up against the banking top. Well, so that was funny. But yes, funny things happened. But I can't say that people were sort of despondent, because in those days the river was, well, they were used to the river flooding. My aunt lived in North Terrace, and it flooded to 3 or 4 feet, sort of frequently, really. But I think things were built different in those days, because you didn't strip the walls out, and there was no fridges, and there was no dishwashers and things like this to get spoiled. And you got used to lifting everything up on bricks and on top of tables, and the higher it got, the more you took upstairs. And as for toilet facilities, the bucket was very handy. And somebody would wait till the floods went down, or somebody would dispose of it for you. So there were some quite exciting times, and it did get people all together, helping people out. And yes, there were some quite exciting times in those floods. But then until the wall was built, I mean, it continued the same. But people that lived close to the river used to have all the plugs put up to about 3 foot up the wall, and they prepared for it. I mean, I lived in Ryther, and we had floods there, and I never got anything damaged, because we used to watch it coming up, and we waited till it was sort of an inch off the step. Before that, we took the carpet up, but you didn't have fitted carpets, you see. It was a carpet square. Took that up, stood everything on bricks or things on top of the table, and then as it got higher, you just move things further up. And if it looked as though it was going to get really deep, the 3-piece suite went upstairs, and anything that would get spoilt was taken upstairs. And we never got anything damaged. But the walls used to dry out, and the floors, they were solid, and they dried out, and the plaster was perfectly all right. Well, nowadays, I mean, the plaster it's not made of the same material, it just melts. But yes, so you got used to it and you prepared for it. But and I mean, the wall has made a great deal of difference. It really has. It's been a boon.